5 million of us live in council houses, with a reputation for being uniform, drab and unappealing. They often don't get a good rep, but some people are refusing to be defined by their state-owned homes.
Because it's a council flat, what are you going to do? You're going to live here with 6 bull terriers and, like, watch Jeremy Kyle all day?
What they don't want to see is man living in council house paints the Renaissance. It's like trailer trash meets the Renaissance.
Behind closed doors, they're going to extraordinary lengths to break the mould and make a mark on the place they live in.
The ceiling, I've got some latex rubber and I made some plasticus out of it.
She said you can paint any colour you like. What I said, like pink, brilliant pink.
Some British council tenants are transforming high-rise flats and concrete blocks into fantasy worlds, private retreats and public displays.
Please tell me if you like my garden. Where else in the entire planet you have a beautiful collection of big memorabilia?
Welcome to Britain's weirdest council houses.
Even if you don't like what you're looking at, you couldn't say it's not interesting.
"40 years ago, more than a third of us lived in council houses. Now it's less than 10%. In the 1980s, the government gave tenants the right to buy their homes, and 2.5 million were sold off. Nearly all the houses in this Brighton estate are now privately owned.
Bobby, let's go. Come on.
Robert Burns lives in one of the few still owned by the council. His 3-bedroom house costs him £107 a week. But he's not let the fact that he's a council tenant dampen his creative spirit.
These are all my Renaissance paintings, and they're dotted throughout the house. I painted them because I truly loved them. The originals are beautiful. Whether I get close to them or not, I don't really know. That's for others to say. But I'm pleased with the result.
I think he's very talented. Don't you? Sometimes he's surprised just how he manages to get the picture right, and it looks as good as the original.
Robert first started his grand council house project 12 years ago.
It was never done to impress anybody else. It was painted probably for my own vanity, I don't know. What always has pleased me is when certainly workmen come in, they're absolutely astonished by this house. I think Linda and I could probably retire if we just opened it 2 or 3 days a week. Bobby Doodle, I don't want you getting your hooter in here.
Robert's never been to Italy, nor seen the original 15th century art he loves to copy.
I discovered the Italian Renaissance by buying a book at a car boot sale in Lewis, just down the road here. I was actually blown away by it. It was the genius of them, the beauty of them. It's just astonishing. I was looking for Renaissance pictures relating obviously to water. There's very few of them, but these ones seem to suffice. That Latin word there means art house.
For 20 years, Robert worked as a painter-decorator, but back then it was mostly just plain old magnolia.
Painting and decorating per se is quite boring, really. I hadn't painted anything of an artistic nature at all. You know, my last art class would probably have been primary school, when you just sloshed paint all over the place. I didn't pick up a paintbrush until I was 53 years of age. If I discovered, say, 20 or 30 years earlier, I might have had a different career. But, as I say, never look back, always look forward.
Unafraid of the modern, in a spare bedroom, Robert's given the Renaissance a contemporary twist.
So we've got Jose Mourinho, painted in the style of Leonardo da Vinci, the Salvador Mundi, i.e. the saviour of the world. Then we've got Wayne Rooney, painted in the style of Francesco de Zurbaran, St. Francis of Assisi in meditation. And of course, there's me on the end there. Painted a few years ago.
Would you like to paint them for real?
Certainly I'd like to paint them for real. I'd like them to buy the ones I've already done.
Any phone calls yet?
No. But we live in constant hope. Whenever we sort of, for want of a better word, say pop your clogs, it will revert to being a council house for somebody else. Whoever does move in will say, oh, well, we'll have to get this painted out. It's not everybody's taste. I always jokingly say, well, they can maybe blue plaque it and buy it for the nation.
100 years ago, there was no such thing as council houses, and the poor were left living in slums. It wasn't until after World War II that the government began knocking down the vast slum estates and replacing them with state-owned homes. And ever since then, council houses have been providing a roof over the head of society's disadvantaged. But not all those who you might expect end up in council houses.
I lived here for over a year. The Rolling Stones owned a house. They had their office further along the road. These are about the most expensive houses in Chelsea.
Throughout the 60 years she spent here in Chelsea, West London, Molly Parkin has lived in some of the borough's most sought-after houses.
I planted all this. Can't believe it's still there.
In 2002, at the age of 70, Molly went bankrupt.
I lived here about 14 years, and this was the family home. I had 2 husbands at different times here. It was an expensive house to buy. I can't begin to think how much it's worth now. Like $1 million, wouldn't you say? Because of where it is. 2 million? 3 million?
In fact, Molly's old house is probably now worth well in excess of £5 million. She still lives in Chelsea, but in a place very different from anything before. This is the World's End Estate, one of the country's highest density high-rise council estates.
This is me, first floor. I never thought I'd end up on a housing estate. I was terrified because it had such a bad reputation.
Molly moved to this first-floor, one-bedroom garden flat 14 years ago.
When they had offered it to me as somebody who was totally bankrupt and over 70, I said, what colour are the walls? And she said, white. And I said, I'm sorry, darling, I can't live in white walls. Both husbands, ex-husbands, insisted on white walls, and I can't do it. So I'm not coming even to see the flat. But she said, she was Welsh, and she said, but Molly, she said, you can paint it any colour you like. What I said, like pink, brilliant pink. Oh, she said, that sounds lovely, she said.
This is the World's End Estate in Chelsea, West London. When it was completed in 1977, it was derided by critics as a brutalist monstrosity. Its high crime rate and dense population have done little for its reputation. Molly Parkin is one of the 2,500 people who call the estate home. Over her 83 years, Molly has lived in more than 30 different properties. This is her first council house.
I always thought that you had to own and buy your own place. And that's what I've done with many homes. But you don't have to own the property.
She's transformed her council flat into something wholly unique. She's even planted her own tropical garden. And inside also, every available space has had the Molly treatment.
I love my bathroom. I love the thought of sitting on the lavvy, as long as it takes, whether I'm passing things or not, just sitting here, because it's only here when you're sitting that you do look at it all. Oh, there's one. See, we've got the cock there. I think that was a good thing.
Back in the day, Molly was one of the original It girls. Television personality, erotic novelist, painter, fashion editor, and general party girl. There was barely a mover or shaker in Bohemian London who Molly hadn't got drunk with.
I don't see it as a life of hedonism. I just was in the fast crowd rather than the slow crowd.
But it couldn't last forever, and by 2002, she was a bankrupt alcoholic.
I then ended up in the homeless department. I don't advise that to anybody. It was the most appalling experience I've ever had. I was offered here on the estate. I regard it as the best of all of the places that I've lived in London, or indeed in the world. This is my kitchen. I use the kitchen as well for my painting.
When Molly was in the depths of her alcoholism, she was unable to paint.
I get rid of this, right? Easy enough to do. I mean, all of this is equipment here, brushes and paints and everything.
Since moving into the flat and becoming teetotal, she's found her muse and is once again a prolific artist.
See, all paints, my favourite. And I put them there, and then the board is there and the paper is on there. And then I go like that. When it comes to prices, this one I've been told not to sell that under 20,000 because it belongs in the Tate. This one belongs in the Tate as well. Each one was painted for a reason, and when I look at them, the reasons why I painted them come back into my life. If I sold them, I'd only have the money, wouldn't I?
Molly's most cherished paintings are based on previous experiences.
This is an orgy, and I used to pick them up in the different clubs that we used to go to and say, you know, I'm just organising this orgy here if you want to join in, which immediately people would say yes. So that's what it represents. He's very drawn to her posterior. And she's about to get pleasured. And these two have obviously got a friendship going on. It's just a jolly evening, really. I mean, I've had hundreds of lovers, a cast of 1,000, really, and I have loved that very much. But in the end, I'm a loner. I think that all writers and poets and painters are really loners. It's you and your means of self-expression. And this is a perfect flat for me, perfect home. Everything is so close. And my garden, I live for my garden. That is my lover. You see, I'm 83 now, aren't I? And I've lost many, many people who were the most precious to me. And I'd be really stupid if I didn't understand that I'm nearer the end of my life than closer to the beginning of it. And so I think that there was a nesting instinct in me, like birds with their nests, to choose the right place in which to die. All of those homes that we saw this morning, none of them had this. None of them had this.
The 1970s Britain was the decade of the high-rise tower block. As the population soared, local councils saw them as the perfect solution to the housing shortage. In the space of just 10 years, 4,500 high-rise towers, like these ones in Southampton, were erected. Adrian Riemann lives here on the 11th floor.
I love living here. My wife loves the area. There's a lovely beach along the front. It's a council estate, but as far as council estates go, it's very nice living over here.
65-year-old Adrian, a former cabinet maker and joiner, retired 10 years ago, but he's never stopped working on his flat.
This is the lounge. This is where I've done most of my work. The ceiling, I've got some latex rubber and I made some plaster casts out of it. I used a lot of brass. All these bits along here are out of plugs. You know, the 3-point plugs. These are egg cups here. This clock I made, there's a little drawer in the front, a little brass drawer. All these things, these are radiator keys. I thought that would look quite nice, you know.
He's managed to completely restyle his flat for less than £2,000.
A lot of the stuff I haven't paid for at all. I've sort of rescued out of skips or been given it, you know.
Adrian and his wife have lived together in the flat for 30 years.
A lot of people say, well, do you own your flat? And I say, well, no, but I've got nobody to leave it to, I haven't any children or anything. They say, well, why have you spent so much time and money on it? I said, well, I live in it, you know. I want to live in a nice flat. I couldn't live in a place that I couldn't improve. When you sit there and you look around and you think, I used to sit there and think, well, I could make that look really nice. I just wanted to do it to please myself, I suppose, you know. The bathroom took me the longest out of all the rooms, about 3 months probably, on and off, you know. I wanted to use a lot of mirrors because it's such a small room and it opens it up. It's nice to have a bath in here and see the back of your head with all these mirrors.
Council tower blocks like these have never had a good rep. According to a recent poll, less than 1% of us would choose to live in a tower before a house. Adrian Riemann is the exception to the rule. He pays just £90 a week for his 11th floor council flat, but he's turned it into one of Britain's most extraordinary properties.
I've been doing it for about 25 years, in between jobs, so that's why it's taken so long. I've usually been employed.
Adrian's uniquely styled flat was designed and built entirely by his own hand, and his inspiration comes from his former life as a sailor.
I was 20 years at sea. First trip I did to sea was on this 6-month tanker. The next ship I got after that was the Queen Mary, and I loved it on there. It was a wonderful ship. Everything was done in Art Deco. I love Art Deco, and I just loved it on the ship.
Adrian hasn't been to sea for 30 years, but the cruise ship Golden Age has left its mark.
I do think the Queen Mary has influenced me. I've got a really good memory. I could see a design 20 years ago and still remember the way the design looked. I've been on 70 different ships. Most people will stay on the same ship all their lives, but I had to keep moving all the time, you know. It's not because I've been incapable of doing the work, it's that I just don't fit in. I've never fitted in anywhere, you know. I'd been to doctors for years. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I knew there was something wrong. And then I found out that I've got Asperger's syndrome. And I thought, no wonder I didn't fit in. I always thought I was a terrible person. But when I found out I had that, I thought there was a reason for why I couldn't do all these things, you know. I love Van Gogh. Van Gogh was mentally ill. I've read books where they've said Van Gogh did have Asperger's syndrome, which is a sort of social illness, you know. These people are fine when they're left on their own. They can be very clever. They've got the eye for it. Whereas you take them to a party, they'll sit in the corner and not talk to anybody, sort of thing, you know.
Is that like you?
A bit like me, yeah.
The flat's second bedroom has become Adrian's workshop and sanctuary.
I reckon I've spent more time in this room than any other room in the house. I couldn't do it if I wasn't the way I was. I can spend hours and hours doing something detailed and silly. I didn't intend it to be so intricate, but once I'd started, I couldn't stop. It's the happiest I've ever been living here. I mean, I think we'll live here until they pull the blocks down, which they threatened to do years ago. And I'll move somewhere else and probably do the same to that.
In the 60s and 70s, more than 2 million new council houses were acquired, but not all were new builds. Some local councils had a programme of buying existing properties in low-cost and undesirable areas, like this flat in a Victorian terraced house in central London.
Look at the cushions. Got one asleep there. You all squashing them. Sit up. Sit up.
David Hodge lives here with his photographer husband, Mark.
I've got 19 cushions on this bed.
And he has a very precise notion of how his council house should look.
It kind of really irritates me when people squash them, kind of. Thanks.
It's nice and cosy.
People assume that because it's a council flat, what you're going to do? You're going to live here with 6 bull terriers and, like, watch Jeremy Kyle all day. Not everyone's like that.
David moved into the flat 19 years ago while working as a care worker on a low income.
Do you tell people that you live in a council flat?
Yes, yeah, I tell people that this is a council flat. There's nothing to be ashamed about living in a council flat. Usually they're jealous. The first thing people ask, because this is such a fantastic location, is, well, how much is that then? Zone 1, beautiful, really nice area, up and coming, with every amenity within 50 feet of our door. We currently pay £140 a week between us.
On the private market, renting a 2-bedroom flat similar to this would cost around £600 a week.
My mum came from a very poor background, so she always had kind of like high ambitions, even though she came from absolutely nothing. Really house proud, my mum, and she likes quite grand things. That's what I've inherited from her. Everything has to be very particular, very nice. I would describe this flat as Liberace on a budget. It's tacky, it's over the top, it's ostentatious, it's slightly vulgar. I know I haven't got what most people would define as good taste. Taste, to me, is absolutely irrelevant, and it's like art. You either like it or you don't.
David's husband, Mark, moved in 2 years ago.
I think it's tacky. It's not my taste at all, but we do have a polar opposite taste in everything, really. So my flat would look like David's hell, which is like a white cube, everything in white or grey or black.
Mark would have the flat very minimal. Everything would be very neat, everything would be very tidy, and very, very boring. You see people living like that and they think they've got the most amazing taste. I'm so chic, look at my beautiful modern apartment. Doesn't reflect them at all, doesn't reflect their interests. At least this flat has a connection to me.
In the late 90s, David found fame as Dusty O, becoming one of London's most successful drag artists and DJs.
I've DJ'd at all of the big gay clubs, really. Doing really high-profile things like for Versace and Grace Jones, the Pet Shop Boys, Elton John. DJ at the first Gay Pride Festival in Johannesburg and like to Brazil and everywhere. I went to 27 countries in 18 months.
2 years ago, David hung up his dress and retired his alter ego.
I don't have a rock and roll existence anymore. I used to spend a fortune and make a fortune as well, but I don't now.
David now makes a living as an artist, selling his paintings on the internet.
Luckily, I can make a few quid on my paintings. I make enough to live modestly on. I've got really nice balance in my life.
And he's found another use for his flat, as a studio for husband Mark.
I often get asked by drag queens and burlesque people if they can use the flat for photo shoots. It does lend itself to that kind of photography. And that's brilliant because that's what Mark is good at.
So pretend that someone's there, sleeping, and you'll be sort of haunting them.
He's very good at making men look like ladies.
Can you do more scary? Yeah, that's fair. That's good.
Been here 19 years, paid my taxes, paid my bills, never signed on. So yeah, I do think I've got a right to pay what we pay because we contribute.
Not all of the UK's social housing is run by councils themselves. Around 50% is managed by housing associations, private non-profit making organisations that provide low-cost housing for people in need of a home. Like Jam Imani Rad.
It's my friend. Hello.
Originally from Iran, Jam has lived here in Preston for the last 14 years.
Preston is full of nice people. That's my place. That's where I live. Come in. I have to take my shoes off. Oops.
Jam's £70 a week, one-bedroom flat isn't big, but it's totally functional.
This part is a disco. Sometimes I dance in the morning. La, 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 la. I always spend a little bit of time every day ritually on the house. It's important, the place you live, it has to reflect how you see the world. And I like a house with lots of colors. I know you may think this is mumbo jumbo, but it's the love I put in this house. You can see every corner of it. It reflects how I felt in that time when I created it.
Up until 1982, Jam was working in his mother country as a journalist.
Iran was such a nice country, but we wanted to have a better country. After the mullahs came to power, they make people frightened. Disaster.
He soon became an enemy of the new regime.
For writing some books, I got into trouble. I did get 3 times death penalty. I did not go to the courts. I was on my way to escape from the country.
Jam escaped to Europe, where he lived for 20 years. In 2003, he got a job in the UK and was entitled to apply for social housing. Safe from oppression in his council house, Jam is free to express himself.
Creativity means life. Creativity is the proof that you are here, you're still alive, and you can use your talent and creativity. That is what I do.
Up until 2 years ago, Jam was working as a yoga teacher.
When I became retired, suddenly I got plenty of time, and I never did gardening before in my life. This was the first time. And gardening is very addictive. When they start to grow, you start finding connection between the things you have created.
Look at my sunflowers. They are taller than me. Aren't they nice? From just a little seed, look what has... Look, is it not wonderful?
I think now it's gone to almost 6,000 pounds altogether I spent.
This is the biggest guitar in Preston.
I have not any more saving in the bag.
But for Jam, the money's been well spent. Planted on a plot of land between his front door and a busy street, the garden has become something of a local attraction.
Please tell me if you like my garden.
We love it. We've seen all the hard work and dedication it took.
I met many new friends, interesting people that I don't think without this garden I would have had a chance to meet those people. The garden has created a friendship between us.
Hello, girls. Do you like my garden? See? They all like it. Yes, thank you so much.
But not everyone in Preston is so enamoured with Jam's garden. The land he's built it on isn't actually his, but communal land under the care of his housing association, Gateway.
You know, it's easy if you own the house, you can do anything you like. Why should only rich men have gardens? The poor man also should have garden.
Jam was never granted permission to plant the garden, and there's been an ongoing battle between the two for the last 3 years.
I don't know why Gateway wants to destroy it. It's not doing any harm to anybody.
The Housing Association claims the heavy stone statues are a public health risk. Jam thinks they have a more prudish agenda.
I'll show you what really upsets them. This statue, they say it is dangerous to public because the boobs are naked, they are not covered, and that has pornographic effect. Now, this is the other things. They still say it has to move, even though we cover it. We cover the boobs. Just let me have a quick look if they are still there. Yes.
Gateway hasn't formally complained about the lack of clothing, but the dispute shows no sign of dying down. Yesterday, Jam received a letter.
This is the letter from Gateway, threatening letter. Action required. Remove the statues and remove the outside wiring. There are some cables I have done, but there is no electricity in it. If legal action is necessary, we will also seek an order that you pay our cost. Do you see they know how much I'm earning.
And you're not going to remove the statues?
No, definitely not. How would I feel about myself? I would feel like SHIT if I just say yes, sir, no, sir. How about the principle in life? You also have some principle, some moral.
For Jam, the best form of defence is to go shopping.
Oh, look at this one. Oh, we cannot have this one because of this.
For a Gateway, a disaster. The good things about this is it has no boobs. The Gateway Housing Association started really upsetting me. So I had options. I could start disliking them and hating them, or I could plant a tree every time they upset me. People say after you die, you go to heaven and hell, and so what a nonsense. When you die, it's over. Game over, it's finished. So let's celebrate it. Let's enjoy it, this single life you have. And garden gave me that joy I was looking for.
The Sandsfield estate in South Wales was built in the 50s to house workers from the nearby steel plant.
Thank you, Drive. See you again, right? Yeah, the best. Take care.
Barry Kirk has lived here in Port Talbot for the last 35 years. And although it's his home, it's dominated by a unique collection.
Welcome to the Baked Bean Museum of Excellence.
He's turned his 2-bedroom flat into the world's only museum of baked beans. Barry gives tours of his flat dressed as his superhero alter ego, Captain Beanie.
Captain Beanie from Planet Venus, everybody. Up, up and away, and may the force go behind you.
Barry spent £6,000 creating the museum.
I got in touch with the Wales Tourist Board and I said, excuse me, but I am a tourist attraction. Because everybody phones me up and said, I'd like to see the museum. And they said, OK then. So they contrived this certificate to prove I am a recognised Wales Tourist Board tourist attraction. I love living in a council flat because I made it for my own purpose. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but to me, it's a visual concept. I'm very pleased.
Before the flat became a museum, Barry lived here for 12 years with the rest of his family.
It was just a normal living room, adorned with household effects. You know, we had a television over there, we had a three-piece suite, dining tables and everything. At the time, it was myself and my mother and my younger brother. And basically, we were just living here, happy and content as Larry. And when they moved out and my mother passed away, I decided to take over the flat and do it in my own inimitable way. In the beginning, the council were a bit reticent to think that I converted the front room into a Bakeby museum. I did have one official year to say, you can't have this, that, the other, because they were a bit worried about carloads coming here, coaches coming here to see me on droves.
But despite their concern, Neathport Talbot Council hasn't yet had to lay on extra parking.
How many visitors have you had altogether?
Do you want me to count them on my hand?
Perhaps, surprisingly, Barry's flat is not the only council house in the UK that doubles up as a museum. The other is in Rayleigh, Essex. The Dutch Cottage is home to art gallery curator Faye Laughlin.
I'm immensely proud of my council house. I have what I call Tidy Up Tuesday. I will hoover, put away any personal belongings or things that are of great value, and generally make the house look less like it's my home, my personal space, and make it look really presentable.
There's one condition tied to the £95 a week rent. The cottage is also a living museum. And every Wednesday afternoon, Faye must give personal tours of her 400 square foot cottage to members of the public.
Hello, come in, come in. Oh dear, the rain.
Yes. Do you want us to remove their shoes?
No, it's fine.
Are you sure?
Yes. It is quite strange that you would be allowing the public into your house, into your personal space. To the right is the bathroom.
Oh, that's sweet.
And then on your left is the kitchen.
Oh, I love this. I think it works well. It does. It does.
People do want to open cupboard doors. Children generally want to open my wardrobe, and I have had children bouncing around on my bed.
The house was built 250 years ago, and it was privately owned until 1954, when the owner gifted it to the council on condition the local landmark could become an official tourist attraction.
So how many people would have lived with these many families?
Back in Victorian times, there was actually 10 people that lived here all at the same time. So there was a mum, a dad, 7 children, and a lodger. Can you imagine that, boy? 10 people all living here together at the same time. Where did they all sleep?
I don't think they slept very well.
The Port Talbot Baked Bean Museum's roots don't go back quite so far.
As you can see, I'm well oiled, just to make sure that the baked bean sauce doesn't quite stick to me.
It all started in 1986 when Barry Kirk attempted a new world record.
There we are, fighting fit. The Beanathon was a sponsored record attempt to get into the Guinness Book of Records for us to have 100 hours in a bath of cold baked beans, mind. So everybody took it in turns, have a tin of beans and pour it over my chest. There we are. No pain, no gain. It totally changed my life. Captain Beanie was created out of his bath of beans. I was totally shattered, totally shattered. That's my late mother. Oh, it makes me feel so emotional now, like. She was ever so proud of me as well, and even to this day, people always say, like, you know, your mother would have been proud of your son. Oh, bless.
In 1990, his mum fell ill with cancer. Barry took early redundancy so he could care for her.
She passed away in 1997. I was 40 45 and she was 76. And I still miss her. She's the biggest part in my life, as mothers and sons are. And yeah, and I wish she was here now. Sorry about that.
Alone in the flat, Barry immersed himself in his baked bean fantasy world.
Somebody said people, when they go through a bereavement, they offset that bereavement, not to face it. And I guess I did this baked bean museum to alleviate the bereavement.
Eventually, Barry got back on his feet. He threw himself at his charity work, running marathons, recording songs and performing stunts.
I got involved with charity fundraising because I had so much, basically, the love for it. I literally adapted my wackiness, believe it or not, for charitable purposes. If it wasn't for charity, I'd probably end up in a funny farm by now, being in a psychiatric ward.
Do you think you'll always be Captain Beanie?
Yeah. I thought I was going to knock it on the head when I was 40. I was going to knock Captain Beanie on the head when I'm 50. And here we are at the age of 60, still going strong. I'm thinking further down the line, pushed around in a wheelchair, an orange one at that, you know. And an old folks home. And I'd still be there pushing the wheelchair in my cape and superhero costume. Don't print that. Yeah.
I have to wear a suit today. I have to make myself more beautiful.
Today, Jam has been summoned to Preston County Court.
For the court, you have to be presentable.
The judge will decide how to go forward with the legal proceedings between him and his housing association.
I have to keep my beard up here.
They allege that Jam planted his garden without permission and the statues he erected are a public health risk. Jam has chosen to attend without a solicitor.
We do have good judges in this country. That's what makes this country a wonderful country. It's nothing like you going to court to Iran. Sometimes I have backflash of what went on in the court in Iran. They were not very nice experiences. But still, I have not digested them.
In the late 70s, Jam was working as a journalist in his mother country of Iran. When the Islamic Revolution broke out, Jam found himself on the front line.
I was working with ITN, attending the courts. The whole court did not take more than 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, they decided whether the person should be executed or he can leave. And usually, if they say, okay, go to the right, means he was lucky. And go to the left means execution right afterwards. Unfortunately, not many people got to the right. And I had to film these executions, and so I had to photograph those events sometimes. And sometimes I talked to them. They allowed me to talk. And I knew a few minutes later, he is going to be in front of fire squad. It was not nice. And I was seeing all these people that I was talking to them in the morning and they didn't exist in the afternoon.
After 2 hours in the courtroom, a compromise has been reached. Jam has signed an order promising not to make any more alterations to his garden until the case goes to court again later in the year.
The judge said, if you are not a good boy, we will seize your assets. You don't have much assets, but okay. And we put you in prison. This is fine. Let's see what will happen. Maybe part of me is a troublemaker, so maybe I cannot blame all to the gateway. So I think it's a blood of rebellion, if you like, is also inside me.
Not a little bit worried that you're going too far now?
No, it's becoming even more interesting. No, definitely not. So,
I see you. Bye.